right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Hewins. I work in the admissions office at RISD. I help with the graduate recruitment effort. Thank you for joining our open house session. This will be a 1-hour dedicated session focused on the interior architecture program at RISD. With us today, we have the graduate program director and department head of the program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eduardo.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eduardo Benamor Duarte, and I'm the department head. I'm participating in this open house, welcoming and thanking everyone for participating. And I'll pass to my colleague, Jan Altai.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are and from what time zone you are joining us. My name is Can Altay. I'm an associate professor and the graduate program director at RISD Interior Architecture Department. And today we will kind of walk you through and talk you through the three programs that we are offering. But first of all, let me commend you for giving the time and attention towards such an important step for your education, career, and life. And it's good to have you all in this session. So today, Professor Duarte and I will talk through the graduate programs and tell you a little bit about what interior architecture is and how we approach interior architecture at RISD through the three programs that we are offering. So interior architecture is ultimately about how we can transform the existing built environment and how we experience the spaces we inhabit. So to make those transformations, it necessitates, on the one hand, a keen look and attention to existing structures, the existing built environment, and what to derive from it, what values to highlight, what values to maybe change and transform. But also a very kind of formal, structural, cultural dimension as well, because it's ultimately about how we live together, how we shape our environments, and what we as designers, as interior architects can offer to these processes of transformation. And with regards to that, it's also very much related to how we relate to the world that we live in, and questions of sustainability come to fore quite often. It is by nature a regenerative practice because we are always looking at what's existing and what parts we can keep, what parts we can shape, and maybe what parts we can demolish, as this kind of expressive model suggests as well. And today we'd like to go through the studio culture a little bit, especially for those of you who are not coming from a similar field or from the architecture or design field. Studio culture is a kind of important aspect of our life. And then we'll talk about the other offerings, the other possibilities that you'll have when you study at RISD, such as participating in campus exhibitions, the ability to take on assistantships and fellowships, grants and material funds. And Professor Duarte will go deeper into community engagement and study abroad by sharing some previous examples. And then we will both talk with you about the curricula of these three programs, their focus areas, what makes them differentiated, and also share with you some student work from each program. So you have a sense of what we produce here, what we learn here, what kind of environment we exist in. And we will close with looking closely at some one-to-one scale design build projects that we are actually quite proud of as a department. And again, Professor Duarte will walk you through those and touch on alumni and the global network of alumni that you would be joining if you were to study in RISD. But let's start with graduate life and what studio culture means and what to expect, in a sense, about your days at RISD when you join RISD. It's a world of creativity, It's a world of making and the world of daring as well. That often involves a very messy process. It's a messy environment, as you can see, but there's lots of kind of ideas in progress. There's lots of materiality, working with materials, making, and all of these take place in the studio. And the studio, as the name suggests, is where you study, where you produce all your work. And for those of you who are not coming from the field, it is also where you'll be spending the most of your time when you are here. And so the studio is also where you show your work, where you make your work visible and share it with the faculty, but also, I think perhaps even more importantly, share it with your peers, with your cohort. In a sense, a place where you learn not only from us, but from each other, and most importantly, learn through making and demonstrating what you have made. And these are again some examples of like how studio work can create different environments, even through the learning process. And the studio is also takes place not only in our campus buildings, but it's as a field, since we are so much embedded in working with the existing built environment. It also takes place in existing spaces. It's um, it's where you kind of look into existing environments, again, explore together the gravity of the existing built environment, but sometimes also the non-gravity spatial experience, as this image from a studio visit shows. And there are also a lot of facilities at RISD campus that you will have access to and that help you navigate your learning experience, such as the nature lab seen here, the biodesign makerspace that help you understand living materials, or this visit to the Guggenheim exhibition design department, which was kind of very important access to the actual professionals who are on the ground with curators and designing those large-scale exhibitions at the Guggenheim, and our students made this visit to see their process, how their studio looks like and what they work on. And uh, in a way, we are always kind of uh, opening up to the campus as well through these moments of special exhibitions. This image is from a graduate biennial, which is an exhibition that takes every 2 years, dedicated completely to graduate student work, both designed by the students and also showing graduate student works. And it's really a kind of important moment to also learn in public, to expose your work, to expose your process, and to also articulate your thoughts. Similarly, the department triennial, this time it includes also undergraduate work, but is organized by our graduate students and designed and installed by our graduate students, is another such exhibition where all these kind of now 3 years duration of work, samples, models, drawings, everything that's produced in the department are being showcased. And again, it's one thing to make these works, and it's another thing that you learn is to articulate, to position, to create compositions of how these works can come together to make a coherent space for an audience. And in that sense, it's also part of your learning process. Not only a showcase of what you do, but it's part of the learning process. I think that's really important. And similarly, there's the grad show, which is the thesis show. That's also a very important moment. And we engage in experimentation, but ultimately we also emphasize professional experience. And we are well aware that this is a graduate school that is really oriented for professional life. So it's also important that our graduate students experience a kind of professionalism within and through their studies as well. And the assistantships are really an important aspect of that experience. Assistantships mean that you can work as a teaching assistant, a research assistant, or even a graduate program assistant working in actual solving actual problems, contributing to actual learning process, and also the teaching process of your professors. And it's also a really robust kind of addition to possibilities of financial support. And some assistantships also result in really amazing output, like this project where an exhibition design and narrative environment student uh, designed, fabricated, and installed this exhibition at the Fleet Library in at RISD. Or in the case of Rachel, uh, this is an assistantship that resulted in a research body of research that kind of brought her to present in conference, and it's also comes with grants and material funds because with doing such work, there are also grants and material funds that you can apply to along your study and through your own work get support towards realizing, manufacturing, exhibiting, or presenting the output or contribute to the process. Such as this student who was kind of working on exhibiting wildlife, and she had access to travel conference funds where she was able to travel and visit the sites that she kind of wanted to explore and work in and about. And again, another example, like there's many of these, but the kind of, I think, bottom line is that there is a possibility. And not only that there is a possibility, but we really encourage you or our students to really benefit from these funds that are available at the RISD as a school. So I'll leave the mic to Professor Duarte to talk a little bit about community engagement now.
Yes, and I would like to frame the idea of community engagement again with the question of sustainability and adaptive reuse. Many times we can think about the climate or we can think about the built environment as really the center of sustainability, but in our department we also look at our community at large and the lives of the individuals that we live with together with as key, as important. So, as my colleague, Professor Altai said, our studio is not only happening in the study, in the studio space. Our studios also go out into the world and many times collaborate with civic organizations or nonprofit organizations in Rhode Island to help mitigate an issue, help mitigate access to food, access to shelter, access to basic needs that sustain our life as individuals. Another aspect of the community engagement is, as Professor Altai mentioned, is the idea of having your work shown in public. And here, this is my colleague, Professor Rudolph, presenting visions for the Rhode Island State House reimagined beyond a civic and political assembly space, but also a center open to the community in Rhode Island. So many times our students are really the leading these investigations and these somehow provocations as individuals that really have preoccupations that go much beyond their own community. Housing is a human right, and many times our students and our studios are focusing on housing, accessible housing in Rhode Island. Many times also the focus of our department is expanded beyond the interior, is expanded towards rehabilitation of infrastructure, rehabilitation or repurposing of existing infrastructure such as the Pell Bridge in Newport being repurposed to provide bicycle access. And we use technology to simulate and disseminate some of these studies. Our graduate students do not necessarily only study in Providence, in campus, but they have a range of chances. And those chances are essentially circumscribed to three opportunities. On the one hand, advanced studios or lottery studios may have a travel component in which for 1 week during the semester, students may travel with their faculty members to the world. This is an example of a studio that students in interior architecture enrolled in Portugal, looking at the rehabilitation of a 17th century palace in Lisbon. And again, the same preoccupations of public engagement were offered by having students presenting their visions at the palace, working with the community, and eventually bringing back this information to the studio and sharing in the Providence community their findings. So this was an example of also of a place where the focus of our program really found a very interesting home, a home where various layers of adaptations, various layers of interventions were coexisting in the same space. So questions on how to intervene were particularly sensible at that time, and students really, for the duration of 1 week, were able to engage with the workshops and the artist residents and actually build their own proposals on site. So it is not only necessarily a travel engagement for observing, but it's also a travel engagement for building with local materials, building on site, and engaging with the community. Another example of a workshop at the Domaine de Bois Boucher in France, where a collaboration between interior architecture, textile, and architecture led for students to propose acoustic screens in France. As I mentioned, the large portion of our winter session could be dedicated to study abroad through our RISD Global programs. RISD Global generally offers 4 to 5 study abroad classes that are 4 weeks engagements, such as in this case the Morocco engagement or Portugal engagement. So these curricular engagements may be repeated over time, but many times these courses are shifting to various locations in the world, and I think that's also what also makes them quite interesting. So I would now pass back to my colleague, and we're going to delve deeper into curricula and student work.
Thank you, Eduardo. I think you already touched on like really important aspects of the study through those examples that you showed really kind of demonstrate the core of where we stand as a department. So if we kind of zoom into each department, I think it's each program that we are offering, I think it's important to kind of outline one by one what kind of necessities of background, especially for this one, and what duration and what the focus of studies are more in depth. So the 1 year plus MA program in adaptive reuse is a 45 credits degree, and it's really tailored for students with in-depth experience and knowledge in architecture or directly related field, because it's a really intensive program of a year-long studies towards building on that existing knowledge and experience to uh, to kind of generate individual knowledge and output and preparation for the professional realm with regards to large-scale structures, architecture, buildings, historical buildings, and also sites where kind of a change is necessary. Perhaps there was a purpose-built building which is no longer functioning according to its purpose and needs to be readjusted, reconfigured, or perhaps it's a structure in dilapidation that needs to be addressed both structurally and programmatically. By program, I mean the activities, the functions that you will kind of propose to that particular site. Or perhaps it's a much more public space or even an infrastructural space where you are re-envisioning the ways in which that space can be formulated, formalized, and also used and kind of provided as a public amenity. And we'll go back and forth, so we don't maybe no longer need to kind of change the mic, but Eduardo, feel free to jump in and tell us about the project.
Perfect. So every spring semester, the MA Adaptive Reuse students concentrate on one topic and one issue. So every year the issue is surrounding adaptive reuse, but as we can see through these different slides, we have different focus. While in this case in particular, we were looking at sea level rise and in Newport, and in particular the Point neighborhood. And students' visions were quite accurately reflecting preoccupations that exist in our profession and exist in our lives. And interestingly enough, the New York Times covered their proposals and helped to disseminate the work. The students also have, as my colleague mentioned, an opportunity throughout their academic year to engage with issues of adaptive reuse that supersede the only a punctual intervention or even almost uh, a realistic, if I may say, intervention. So on one hand, I would like to give examples of studios that have happened in the past where students were asked to propose speculative visions for adapting canonical monument brutalist buildings in the United States towards new functions. So while the explorations centered on the issues of monumentality, students were asked to use tools and media to re-envision these buildings, these experiences. Another example was the idea of how do you intervene in a landmark? How do you intervene within the structure of an existing museum, such as the Yale British Art Center, and propose a new addition or and also a new exhibition space. So these examples somehow centered around the broad range of what adaptive reuse is, but in most of all the respect and the acknowledgement of what an existing structure is.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Eduardo. So that was the MA program, which was as we mentioned, a year long, kind of year plus duration, really intense, focusing on a particular mode of production and geared towards students with a particular background. But the MDes in interior studies consists of two tracks. One is again focused on adaptive reuse, and the second one is on exhibition design and narrative environments. And in this 2-year, 75 credit adaptive reuse Master of Design program, it's now geared towards both students coming from a similar background, but also from any background. So it really starts, both these programs really start with a summer intensive where we cover the basics of representation, structural knowledge, insight into existing spaces, and then build from there on through again the design work and ultimately culminating in a thesis work, which is really important for us for the 2 years plus programs. They result in a thesis book and project, which is a kind of culmination of all the experience and all the knowledge that you have gathered. So we can look at some examples of projects and theses that are covered that have been outputs of this program.
Yes, absolutely. And this is an example of what one may call a retail studio, in the sense that there is an existing typology or program which is retail. In this case, students were working with a particular client in mind and understanding how do you design a language or a spatial language to respond to the attributes of a brand or to respond to the qualities of the brand. So there's really a spatial investigation on interiority and on different types of forms and spaces. And this is really foundational because this student in particular was not coming from a design discipline, was literally coming through the summer program, through the foundation summer program, and then by their second year was already exploring spatial concepts in high detail and quality. That same student led this same spatial investigation into their thesis and exploring again the idea of type, the idea of form, the idea of interiority of different spaces providing different levels of intimacy, different levels of community, and it's really almost an alphabet of forms that the student was recreating. Another example of a thesis repurposing an office building for a homeless shelter in New York City, quite of an important topic. And lastly, the repurposing of an island in the Hudson, New York, where a castle was built in the turn of the century, of the 20th century, and the castle is essentially in ruins. So there's definitely a really clear understanding of the existing structure and proposing an artist's retreat in that same island as their thesis. We're going to see that the MDes in Interior Studies Exhibition Narrative Environments has a particular identity that is somehow different from the adaptive reuse.
Thank you so much. These were really amazing to see one more time and see the quality and the range of the projects that have been undertaken at RISD. So the Exhibition and Narrative Environments program focuses on something different in a sense. It focuses more on the experience, on telling stories and conveying ideas through space. So it's more about spatial storytelling. It means so a much more sensory, atmospheric, and at times dramatic take on design, often resulting in temporary but yet still very meaningful spaces. So in that sense, there is a kind of fundamental difference to adaptive reuse, where it was more about structural change, really focusing on like existing forms, formats, structures, and typologies. Whereas here it's more about the bodiless sensation, the experience, but also learning through a spatial experience. And this is again a 75 credit Master of Design program. And you engage in a dynamic study which focuses on kind of making interior interventions, creating narrative environments, and alongside exhibitions and environments of cultural exchange, I think scenographic work such as stage design, brand spaces, even fashion runways can be like listed as examples of what narrative environments can cover. So let's see a few more examples of projects.
Well, students have taken also issues that are present in the US and social issues, cultural issues. And in this case, this is a project for the reuse of a large warehouse in Rhode Island to be repurposed for a museum in which the exhibition topic is on gun violence. So many students that have not have been exposed to that issue learn deeply with experts and propose solutions that narrate a very important issue and really manifest through their designs what experience is being told. Another example that also is of incredible interest is this is the topic of thesis. The topic of thesis being a year-long investigation in your second year, many times becomes an individual project that is on the one hand self-directed, but on the other hand is informed by specialists. So this student in particular was interested in ways of living that are overlooked, and was looking into the idea that there are, as the student express, non-binary ways of inhabiting domesticity. And many times they are not cataloged, or they are not somehow reflected in housing offerings, or even in the way that designers express their sensibilities of potential clients. So student went into a very deep analysis, and also a very deep approach to proposing solutions. So this is just an example of the table of contents of their thesis, and how the table of contents really structures the investigation along the year. So while this is an example of a design thesis that is highly researched, highly thorough, and highly well written, would not necessarily expect that this is the only model for your design thesis. Your design thesis may take different investigations, but what we do really understand is that there is a passion that each of you bring to your studies, and an interest that you want to carry on while you graduate, and the department is really a place for investigation that you can tailor your own education. And again, what we're showing here today are examples fresh from our department, some older, some recent, and this is just an example of actually how a sociological study turns into design, and turns it to an idea of propositions for domesticity. We
Uh,
have other courses.
yeah, sorry. And also does it beautifully, I wanted to say, like really elegantly designed. And yeah, I just wanted to chip in here. Please go ahead.
And our other courses are also embedded in an art and design school. We're not an engineering school. We're not a liberal arts college. We are a college that has liberal arts courses, and a liberal arts division that is very strong and very rich. But we're essentially a making school and an art and design school. And our courses that sustain the studio experience really range to different topics. And I may also share with my colleague here some of those comments. Human factors is really the interaction between humans, technology, and environment, and is really our first experience of space. Some examples of student work, exploring ergonomics, exploring garment, exploring photogrammetry, exploring also other complex issues. Um, on equity and the body. So I I don't necessarily want to take over, but we can back and forward, John, on this, and we're we're about to end some of the presentations of student work, and we will go into the alumni. But some of the issues that we explore are issues around materials, issues around processing of materials. This is an example of a cork focused intensive studio on sustainability, but also other issues related to the construction and adaptation of the built environment, such as simulating masonry construction with timber, and exploring various different construction techniques, working with concrete and plaster in our building technologies classes. So it's not necessarily only lecture based, but it's also empirical knowledge, hands-on knowledge. Um, Technology ranges from tool to tool. We are interested also in photogrammetry and the idea of surveying with advanced tools for Simulation is also an important topic. Simulation, whether it's done through analog means, whether it's done through augmented or virtual reality. But most of all, our education is immersive, as I could say. I pass it on to John to maybe
Yeah, no, I wanted to just highlight, in the beginning we mentioned that interior architecture as a field is about paying attention to the existing with the intention of transformation. And this doesn't necessarily only apply to buildings or spaces, it also applies to societal norms as we see, or material futures, or even new technologies. So I think this lens of looking at what's there, really paying close attention, observing with the intention of new propositions, new kind of ideas of transformation, and then really making the effort to materialize that, I think really sums up the RISD ethos of interior architecture for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are just small examples of an ongoing endowed program across interior architecture and landscape, looking at sustainability and materiality in New England. It's the Sustainability Lab. This is the year one edition, looking at clay and clay applications in the built environment, looking at rammed earth, wattle, and daub. Another example of interdisciplinary collaboration with the Nature Lab students realizing the biomaker space, which still exists in campus, which is the byproduct of an advanced studio that students design, iterate, collaborate, and share and collaborate with other colleagues to fabricate and install in campus. So if you're coming to campus in the future, you're welcome to visit and use this great facility. The Spy Formica that John presented in relationship to exhibition and narrative environments, and the idea of the pavilion, the idea of the public interface for visitors to experience the qualities of a material and to aggregate, congregate, and converse around specific experiences. So this is a somehow of a trade show experiential space. And I will conclude with a little bit of a conversation of where do we go after graduating from RISD. And I have been at RISD for the last 12 years, and many times I'm really interested in understanding where what drives our students to RISD and what drives our students out of RISD. And if we were to say that there is no single common destination, we would be wrong. There is a variety of options that all our students take. Many times our students are pushed into the profession from a from a standpoint of really wanting to enter the job market, and many times they work for 2, 3, 4, 5 years in large architecture and interior design firms, such as the ones that we highlight here in this slide. But many times they venture out on their own after particular experiences. Colin Steve is one esteemed alum, co-runs in a boutique interior design firm in New York. We also have alumni that really are purposefully engaging with social justice justice work and social justice work within their communities, within within the context of their studies at RISD. And in this case, Joyce Kuti won a Maharian fellowship to engage with particular issues of our interest. Anaira Ali in India has been working with food access programs and won a very prestigious award for her proposal to bring nutrition in a particular region in India. Other students have ventured out into the exhibition design and running the Qatar exhibitions museum program. Other students really somehow go back in, and I love this idea of the going back to their fine art practice, but engaging fine arts with a very particular architectural and spatial understanding of interaction with user, interaction with space, such as our alumna Sui Park. But this is only a range, and we would be happy to show many more, such as our alumna Grace Yoon is working in O plus A in San Francisco, has been recognized by one of the uh, highest talents in the field of interior architecture by Metropolis magazine. Or if we go back 20 years ago, and Annie Thamart, who's a senior designer at Nike in their retail experience division. So again, a range of interiors is pretty broad, and your RISD education is only a stepping stone into realizing your dreams and your aspirations, and connect with a large global network of designers and makers. So this is our small spiel, and we're happy to have time for Q&A.
That was a great presentation. Thank you so much, Eduardo and John. All right, just to give everyone a heads up, I do have to end the session at 10:55, excuse me, to start another webinar. Maybe I'll see you at that other session, but we do have some time for questions, so feel free to start writing them in the Q&A section of Zoom. All right, we do have a couple of questions already, and I'll just dive into those. This is an eligibility question. This person is interested in the MDes program, but actually already has a 5-year bachelor's degree in architecture. Can they still do the MDes program with BArch?
Absolutely. I mean, of course it depends on like which program focus they are interested in. If it's adaptive use, they are also eligible to apply for the MA. But for the MDes, they would be more than welcome. And if they want to focus on exhibition and narrative environments, then the background in architecture would be also a really great beginning point to start venturing into this field.
Great. Next question. Is the Interior Architecture Adaptive Reuse Program CIDA accredited? Since a lot of jobs need the accreditation, will it be an issue to get a job?
Eduardo, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, it's a credit. You will you can pursue your NCIDQ registration, interior design, and the interior architecture master's programs are a pathway to that accreditation.
Thank you. All right. This person's currently a senior majoring in interior design and has a research paper from their final year project. Can they submit their final research paper with the application?
Absolutely, but I mean, the slide room and the kind of visual application process is very particular, so I would pay attention to that, and they can present it as an additional document, refer to it in their letter of intent, and give us insight. I mean, the admissions process and going through all the portfolios is a kind of intense moment for us, but that would definitely help us kind of get to know them better and know about their interests in the field. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And as John mentioned, there is a section in the application itself for additional materials or other documents. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but there's a spot in the application to put these type of documents. So you'll want to put it in there and not in slide room. All right. This question was asked already, but is the MA Interior Architecture program 1 year also STEM designated? Yes, all three tracks in the Interior Architecture program are STEM designated. And I can put more information about that in the chat right now. This is a link to our international office that goes into more details about the STEM OPT eligible programs at RISD. All right, this person's interested in the MA program in adaptive reuse and has done a bachelor's in interior design. Will they still be able to enroll in the MA or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for a long time, it was only designated to students with a Bachelor of Architecture, but recently we have kind of decided to accept applications from related fields. But with a degree in interior design, we would really need to learn more about their structural knowledge and their experience working with existing buildings, working with kind of on a more, let's say, architectural scale as well. So if they are confident in their experience with regards to that, they can definitely apply.
Great. And then there was a second part to this question. How are scholarships and financial aid taken into account? And I can help answer this question a bit. So fellowships and assistantships are eligible to all graduate students, including international students. When you submit your application in your applicant status portal, there'll be an important form in there that you'll want to fill out. It's the RISD Institutional Financial Aid form. By filling this out, you indicate that you do want aid and you do need aid. So that's a critical document that you should fill out if you need financial aid. Domestic students, the FAFSA is now open on time this year. So you'll also want to fill that out if you're looking for federal financial aid as well. But generally, we tell people that fellowships vary from program to program and are need and merit based. Generally, they don't cover the full cost of attendance, so keep that in mind. But just about all students are awarded a fellowship and an assistantship of some amount. Yeah, Eduardo or John, do you want to speak a little bit more about the assistantships?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in addition to financial aid, the assistantships, as we mentioned during the presentation, are open to graduate students on a semester-based terms, and each semester you apply with a kind of demonstration of your abilities, interests, and from the pool of assistantships we are distributing uh, working roles to our graduate students, and which ends up being also a significant contribution to your financial status, but also an experience in working with us more directly on the, let's say, other side of the field where you are maybe a teaching assistant or a research assistant, so you have one-to-one access to your professors and how they kind of lead a course or how they work on a research project.
Thank you. All right, and just checking the time. You may have time for one or two more questions. If we don't get to your question, feel free to email us at admissions@risd.edu, and we'll get your question answered. Just dropping that email address in the chat. All right. This person has a Bachelor of Architecture and 7 years of professional experience in spatial design and workspace design strategy. How much weight does their work experience carry while submitting the portfolio, as they want to showcase self-initiated projects instead that discuss more about what they're interested in pursuing further?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that balance in the portfolio is really important. It's for us, of course, really more insightful if we hear about their current interests and what they want to pursue with the studies. But an acknowledgement of that professional experience would come as a kind of valid information as well. So it's really about balancing it out and kind of giving emphasis to the personal projects as they mentioned, and also their current interests and kind of what they intend to achieve through this study is very significant information for us when we are assessing the applications.
Great. Thank you, John. And the last question, does the Sustainability Design Lab have a physical location, or does the work take place across different studios and spaces within both the CIT and the Weybosset Street studios? Also looking forward to the open house this Friday. Awesome. Look forward to seeing you.
Great.
The Sustainability Lab happens mostly in CIT and the landscape studios, but this year it also happens in the BEB, in the Bayard Ewing building across the river. So there's not a determined physical location. It's really based on shops and also based on the material that we're focusing on.
That's great. Thank you, Eduardo. All right, perfect timing. If you didn't get your question answered, or if you think of something after this session's over, feel free to email us at admissions@risd.edu. I'm speaking for John and Eduardo, but I'm sure they'll be happy to answer questions. I can forward them along to them. So keep them coming, and we're looking forward to seeing your applications and hopefully seeing some of you in person this Friday at the in-person open house. But with that, I think we're done. Thank you, John. Thank you, Eduardo, for doing this.
Thank you all.
Jen, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.